Hey guys, welcome to another episode of LFA Shop Shop. Jackson's here. We're going to work on the toyoace. We're going to try and get some rear brakes happening and try and get the front brakes actually working. So let's get into it. Alright Jackson, what's the first step?
Jack up your car.
Alright, to try and make our lives a little bit easier, I'm going to move the toyoace forwards a bit and swing this bum around so that we have light and can get to both sides pretty easily. Ali, stop with the ball, bro. Alright, so we jacked off the car and then we took the wheels off and put it on jack stands. So now we need to rip off the drum brakes and clean it up and see what's actually in there.
What did we do? First thing, we're going to get some juice down into here. Let that circulate for a bit.
We'll do the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and guess that this doesn't have any brakes in it because it spins very freely. And if that's the case, we might be out of luck today. So we need to try and get these nuts out of here, which hold the drum on. And that's going to be a miserable time. So we'll try and get those out and then the drum can come off.
Oh! Alright, I managed to get this drum apart, and it's a good thing we're doing something with this because she old. There's a skeleton down there. There he is.
Is it Jack?
It is not Jack Skellington, it's Spidey Skellington, his uncle. Alright. How you doing over there, Jeffrey?
Struggle Town.
Struggle Town?
Struggle Town.
Have you tried just doing it?
I haven't tried being better, no. Would you like to give it a whirl? It stinks, so it's something that. Ready? Oh, it's thick. Oh, plug. Why is it red?
Look at that snake oil in there.
Why is it red?
Not sure.
Wow, that smells crook. Alright, so I'm under the truck here doing the diff, so we can't get this brake drum off. So we're going to try and undo everything from the back and hopefully loosen off the wheel cylinders which hold the pads and everything, or the shoes in. And then hopefully if we undo all of that, we can actually just slide the whole lot off together with the axle all in one go, and then pull it all apart in pieces and put it all back together again. And while Jackson's doing that, I'm taking the diff apart. I need to check the diff ratio and also make sure it's not absolutely horrible. and eventually weld it, but I'll probably do that after some test drives. Let's get into it, Jackson.
Heck yeah!
What are your bets on the diff ratio? I think it's in the 6s, but I don't know.
Bloop it down in the comments.
Yeah, put it in the comments. What do you reckon the diff ratio is going to be? It's a commercial vehicle from a long time ago, and it had a tiny 4-cylinder in it, so it's going to be pretty high. Is it in the 5s? Is it in the 6s? Stay tuned. I reckon it's like 625.
625?
What do you reckon?
Are you an accountant? Are you going to count the teeth?
If I have to. So I just do a bit of putting it on the ring, on the pinion.
Ringish medium.
What do you reckon?
640.
$683s. Holy moly. I knew they'd be high, but that's a lot.
I'm going to try and whack it off.
Yeah, you would. Alright, so we've got the diff cover off and we've cleaned all the old oil out. It seems pretty clean, it's just old and really thick. So there's no swarf, there's nothing in there crazy. The diff is like a 680 ratio. What do we work it out to be? 683?
683.
Which is insane. But we did do a rear end calculator, like top speed calculator the other day, and used 7 diff ratio. And top speed's about 150, which is faster than you can go legally, so that'll be fine. I'm going to jump over to the other side, take the drum apart and clean everything up, try and get some rear brakes cleaned and reassembled. Alright, so we got the diff cover off, we got the brakes off, and then everything's sort of cleaned up. The front brakes off the toyoace, which were in a box somewhere, are exactly the same as the rear ones, but those wheel cylinders are also bad. So we rang a couple of shops and we have found one on a shelf apparently. So we're going to take the old ones and go and try and compare the pair, and hopefully they are the same and we can get 1 or 2 wheel cylinders today. So the Hilux ones are no good. So the FJ40 is very similar to these ones. So we'll go get some rear wheel cylinders off an FJ40 and hopefully it works. However, the Hilux axles that are here, one of these is a Hilux drum and one of these is a toyoace drum. And I'm pretty sure that one's the toyoace one because it's filthy, but they're very, very close.
You're wrong.
I'm wrong? Okay,
wrong.
so this one's the toyoace one, that's the Hilux one.
That's how close they are.
They're that close, but the bolts on the diff for a Hilux are 4 stud and the bolts on the diff for the toyoace are 6 studs, so they can't just swap over. So without changing the ends of the diff, which is a mission, we can't put the Hilux stuff on. But that may still happen because there's handbrake cables in the Hilux ones and there's no handbrake on this. and no provision for it now that we have deleted the original gearbox, because the handbrake is on the back of the gearbox. Alright, so it's a new day on the toyoace. We're going to continue with these back brakes. No Jackson today, unfortunately, but I did get some parts. Alright, so on the weekend when Jackson was here, we went for a bit of a shop. Found one of the 4 wheel cylinders we needed. Ordered the other 3, but only 2 shown up. So I've got one side ready to go. The other side is on its way from interstate. So then I cleaned up some of these bolts a little bit. Just got all the dirt and stuff off of them. So what I'm going to do now is just clean that up. Clean out this brake line and then just try and get one side back together. Alright, so I've just gone through and sprayed all of the fittings, all of the nuts and bolts, all the hoses, all the fittings on the hoses, all that stuff with brake cleaner. It's all nice and clean now, everything moves freely. It took a bit of time and it was about a whole can of brake cleaner, but it's worth it if I don't have to make one of these lines. So they're all clear, the brake cleaner flows through them all nicely, so there's no blockages. All these fittings are all cleared out, a lot of those were blocked up. So now I can actually put it all together without fear of something being full of crap. So let's open up these wheel cylinders and see if we can get one side back together. Got all these cleaned up. So this side's nice and clean, the other side's nice and clean. Going to try and put some parts back together and hopefully get one side assembled with what I've got. And then when the rest of the parts come in, I can do the other side. So let's jump into that. Alright, it's another weekend on the toyoace. Jackson is here working on his Yaris, and I jumped under the toyoace here, and I've got the back brakes back together. So I'm just missing the joiner, the rubber line to the chassis, and then I need to make a line to go to the front, and I should be able to bleed these and adjust them and stuff. So diff's resealed and fresh fluid, so that's all nice as well. Everything's happy to go. I just didn't get that rubber line in time, so that kind of sucks. But that's pretty much the back end wrapped up. So I'll bleed this, put the wheels back on, and then it can go back on the ground. Just got to run that line to the front and the rubber line. So it's getting pretty close, and then we can move on to the next job. Alright, so I've put a new brake line nut and a new flare on this piece of brake line. Straightened it out reasonably well, so I need to run that from the front to the back of the truck. And then we can try and bleed these rear brakes and hopefully have some brakes and some pedal. Alright, so it's another new day. I took the old crusty brake line down to Power Brakes, and he made me a new one on the spot. So that was pretty sweet. Only cost $52 as well, which is pretty sweet. So now I can put on the T-junction. I've got some more brake cleaner to flush that out, and then we can put it all in the car and then run a hard line from the front to the back, bleed the front master cylinder, and then it should be good to go. Alright, so before I go much further, I need to make a line to the back from just here. So what I'm going to do is take that out, but that will then drain the fluid obviously. So what I'm going to do is make 2 lines, one from here, go into the top of the master cylinder, and one from here into the top of the master cylinder. Then I'm going to bench bleed the master whilst in place, and then that will also give me something that's not going to leak while I make that back line. So I'm going to whip up 2 little temporary lines / tools, and then I will bleed this thing up. Alright, so I'm going to quickly make these master cylinder bleeding lines. So all I want is a piece of line that I can bend to shape and just 2 little nuts. So they need to go on there, and then I can bend this to whatever shape. Once it's plugged into the master cylinder, it'll come out of the master cylinder and just bleed back into the top. So what I like to do with this painted stuff is just clean off an inch or so at the end so I get a nice flare, and then I can put on the fitting from the back so it doesn't really matter too much. So I'll just clean these up, get some flares happening with this little fancy tool here, and then I'll show you how to bleed the master cylinder, I guess. And there we have 2 lines and 2 flares, nice and done. So I'll chuck these on the master cylinder and move on to the back. Alright, so there we have the 2 lines going into the master cylinder. Ignore this guy, that goes to the front. So out of the master cylinder, up and in. Out of the master cylinder, up and in. So now if I pump this pedal, we should get all the air out of that master cylinder. Alright, so just jumping inside the cab here, I can use the pedal and see the master at the same time, which is super convenient. So other than having already spilled brake fluid everywhere, when I pump this, it should bleed the air out of the master cylinder. The only thing that could be happening is these lines could be a bit too high and actually above the water level or the brake fluid level. So I might have to put some more in there. Alright, let's try that again. I spilled it everywhere again, as you can imagine, so let's try and get this air out. I may have already done this, I can't actually remember, so I'm hoping that this gets air out. There's actually a little grid in the top of that master cylinder that I should have taken out, a little filter. I probably should have taken that out so the lines could go deeper. So if this doesn't work, I'll try that. Look, it seems pretty happy, but I'm not 100% sure. So I might do the back brakes and then come back to this. Alright, so I did remove that little filter and try it again. It seems okay, but again, I'll come back to this once I've done the back brake line. But I did spill it everywhere, which is awesome, because it rips paint off. Alright, now they've got this new brake line, which is awesome. Chuck a copper washer on here and chuck it back into the T-junction, chuck the breather back in and chuck it all back on the diff. Alright, this is going to be interesting. So I've got the new rubber line onto the chassis, so it goes diff to chassis. All the diffs all buttoned up. Now I need to try and feed this line from that new rubber line all the way to the front to the master cylinder. So I think I might start at the front and try and work my way back. But it's going to be pretty tricky. Alright, so I struggled and struggled. I got that brake line all the way to the back, haven't clamped it down. Got the front one threaded in, got it all the way to the back, flared and put on the nut, or put on the nut and then flared it. That was all sweet. And the rubber line is the wrong size. So the thread in the rubber line is smaller than everything else I have Toyota. So I'm not sure what he put on that, but the other end's fine. But that end's a pain in the ass. So I'm gonna have to take that back off, go back to the shop and try and find a flare nut that is the correct size for this end, and then put it all on the hard line and then put it all back together, and then hopefully join those two back together and then put all the clamps on. So that's super annoying to get this far in and find that out, because it's all connected and there's brake fluid going everywhere. So that's super annoying. Alright, back from the shop. It's apparently M9 by 1, which is really annoying, but we have it now. So I'm going to try and chuck this all back in, and hopefully that'll be all the brake lines actually done, front to back, side to side, all that sort of stuff. Let's chuck it in. Alright, so that's front to back, all attached. Correct fitting, new flare, it's all done, all sealed. So it's got a lot of brake fluid in it, obviously a lot of air still as well. So I'm not going to bleed it tonight, I'm going to go to work shortly, but I'll get someone to help me bleed these tomorrow, and hopefully we won't have any leaks, and hopefully they all work. So pretty good progress. Bit frustrating we had to go back to the shop, but hopefully tomorrow when I get to bleed this thing, it should have brakes, finally. Alright, Dale's here. We got a one-man bleeder kit that he has lent me. So I'm going to try and bleed the brakes on this thing and hopefully have some kind of pedal really quickly. Alright, so we bled the brakes as best we can. There's no air in there anymore. However, it does take a few pumps to actually get the brakes to feel nice and firm. So I think that's got to do with a residual valve on the back brake, so I don't have one in there currently. So what's happening is the shoes on the drum are contracting and pushing all the fluid out of the slave cylinders in there and pushing it all back towards the master. So I'm hoping if I put a residual valve in, it'll fix that problem, but I'm just going to leave it for now. There is some pedal, so just before I drive it, I'll pump up the brakes and it'll be fine for a test drive anyway, and then we'll see if they do work at all, because we got to this stage with the front brakes that we thought it felt nice, and then they didn't do anything. So we shall see, I guess. On to the next problem. Alright, so that's everything for the brakes for now. Hopefully they work. If not, we'll try that resi valve and then try and bleed them again. So that'll be on a later episode. So that's it for this week's episode. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next week. I'm going to put that in if you